Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Batra daf Kuf Aleph. It's the daf for the second day of Rosh Hashanah. As noted previously, all the shiurim are going up before, including the daf also for tomorrow, for Shabbat, will be going up before the Chag. So we're going to get started now with the Mishnah. Let's review our Mishnah, or the beginning of the Mishnah. Hamocher makom lechavero la'asot lo kever. So you sell a place for someone to do a burial plot, or you're mekabel mechavero la'asot lo kever, or you take on a job to build a burial spot, a burial cave. The question is, how big does the space need to be? So now we're going to talk about a machloka between the rabbis and Rabbi Shimon. And for this, I use the whiteboard, and there's also, you can find on the website the pictures if you're not on the recording, on the YouTube recording. Pictures will be up, and you should definitely use them because they're very helpful to understand what's going on. So if somebody sells a place for a kever or gets the job, how big does it need to be? So the rabbis had said, Tanakama, you do it 4 by 6 cubits. So you walk into the cave where there's an opening of 4. On one side, there's 6 cubits. On the other side, there's 6 cubits. Out of each of those sides, you're going to have 3 kuchim, 3 crypts. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Each one takes up 1 amma. Okay, 4 amot long, so they're jutting out kind of like fingers sticking out. In a minute, you'll see some pictures when we get to Rabbi Shimon. They're jutting out like fingers, 4 amot long, but the important thing is 1 amma wide. So we have 3 on a side with 6 because each one takes up an amma. In between is another amma, a cubit. Altogether, that's 5 cubits, and a little half on each side left over of a little bit of space. Then the opposite wall has 4 cubits. So in 4 cubits, you can only get 2 kuchim in, and then 2, right, with 1 in the middle, that's 3, and then 1/2 on each side. And the height of it is 7 tvachim high. Rabbi Shimon has a different opinion, and for here we're going to start with the first picture. Rabbi Shimon says we're going to have 6 by 8. Oset tocha shel ma'ara 6 amot al 8. It's going to be 6 by 8. Now, so again, you're going to walk in. Opposite you is a wall of 6. Next to you on either side is a wall of 8. And you're going to get upotech letocha shlosha asar kuch. You're going to have 13 kuchim. How 13? You might notice if you didn't count quickly enough, I'll tell you that my picture only has 11, and you'll see why in a minute. So arba'a mikan va'arba'a mikan, okay, it's got 4 on each of the sides of 8, same reason as before. Now that you have 8, you could do 4. The space in between is, right, there's 3 spaces in between the 4, that's 7. And then you're going to, each one is, and then you're going to have half a cubit on each side. And then they're each 4 long, right, so they jut out by 4. Yeah. Then you're going to have shloshami kinegdan. So arba'a mikan, that's 4 on each side. Opposite, you're going to have 3. You're going to have 1, 2, 3, where it says frame 4, frame 2, frame 3. I couldn't really get rid of the words there. But you're going to have 4. Okay, that's what the FFR is also. It's frames. You can just ignore that. One of the kinks of the whiteboard and making shapes, I use the frame maker. Anyway, you're going to have 3 on the opposite wall because there's 6, and we already learned in a wall of 6 or a space of 6, you can create 3, you can dig 3 crypts. So then you're going to have, so that gets us to 11. That's an easy part of the picture. Now we have a cham yamina petach ve'cham min hasmol. One on the entranceway on the right and one on the entranceway on the left. We assume it's somewhere around here in the entrance area. We can use this laser. It's somewhere around here. One on the right, one on the left. We don't really know where though, because where is their space exactly? So we'll have to deal with that. Now we're back to Tanakama. Tanakama says, well, in the entrance to the Ma'ara, we have what's called a courtyard, okay? A chatzer. And that's where people kind of bring the body. We're going to see in a minute. What's the size of that? 6 al 6. It's 6 by 6. As opposed to the caves that were rectangular, this is square shaped. It has to have enough space for the bed, the body, and the people burying. So 6 on 6 is enough. Now we're going to have that. He's basically saying, and now we get to the final size of what you're supposed to build. You're supposed to build this, that we saw this one picture here of the 4 and the 4 and the 3, or according to the rabbis, it would be 3, 3, and 2, 8 altogether, is all one cave. But if you took on a job to build a burial area, kever, what does a kever include? according to the rabbis, one courtyard. And each side of the courtyard, remember, it's 6 by 6. So we're going to have on two sides of the courtyard, let's say the left and the right, there's going to be a cave. So it's this whole space where you could fit each cave with two caves with 8 kuchim in them. That's the rabbis who altogether have 8. That's your size. Courtyard, 6 by 6, cave, 4 by 6, cave, 4 by 6 with the kuchim coming out on the sides. That whole area is what you have to build. But Rabbi Shimon has a different opinion. And Rabbi Shimon says, Rabbi Shimon, we are arba la arba ruchotea. Okay, now we're going to use this next picture, but we don't yet need the whole picture. Okay, I don't want to confuse you too much. Okay, but basically we have, and the way, I think the easiest way to describe this in case you're not looking at the picture, you describe it like a clock. The center of the clock is where the hands start from, right? That's your courtyard. The courtyard is the center. The other way to read it, understand, is a little bit like a tic-tac-toe board. Okay, maybe that'll even be easier. So we have a courtyard in the middle that's 6 by 6. From each courtyard is a cave. So we have one up, which is, the middle top box of the tic-tac-toe board. One down, right, below the courtyard, that's the bottom middle of the tic-tac-toe board. Then when you're in the middle again, 2 to the side. Okay, so at 12, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock, if you want to go by the clock analogy, whichever works better for you, the clock image. So we basically have one courtyard, 4 caves. Now, at first glance, you say, wait a minute, how are you going to get to the courtyard? Because there's no access route. The courtyard is blocked on 4 sides by caves. Well, you have to remember, the courtyard is on the level of the ground. The caves are dug into the ground. So basically imagine if you have 6 cubits on the wall between the chutzner and each court and each cave, there's steps, let's say there's some, entryway going down. There's an opening where they dug the cave out. And then on the sides, you can walk on top of the cave. The cave is covered. There's just like an opening at some point where they dug it down, and there's some entranceway to that. But the rest of the like, imagine this is all flat. You can get from the cave to the courtyard by walking over the cave. Okay, so that's how you would get to the courtyard. So it's hard to see from this picture because it's not flat. It's different levels. Yeah, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer. Okay, soon we're going to get to all these side parts of the top, right, and left of the tic-tac-toe board. Ignore those for right now. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer hakol lefi hasela. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says the whole thing goes according to a sela. The sela, meaning, now what's the sela? The sela means it depends how hard the rock or the soil is underneath. If the soil is very hard underneath, then you're going to have, if the soil is hard, it's going to be, you're not going to need as much space in between kuchim, right? Now remember, we said it's all about, right, 1 amma width for the kuch and then 1 amma of space in between. But if you don't need a full amma because the rocks, the soil is hard and nothing will happen, they won't fall apart. If you put them too close to each other, you can put them much closer and you can fit more kuchim in. And then you're going to have to dig more of the crypts. And if it's soft, then you're going to need the full amma. That's one way of interpreting it. Some people say if it's soft, then you can actually dig out more because it's much easier and the expectation is to be bigger. Anyway, debate. So it's not clear what Rashbag actually says. Now we get into the big question, which we didn't understand in the Mishnah. The Gemara asks, these two, the two near the entrance, where exactly do we put them, right? Somewhere on this entranceway, we have to put kuchim, but there's no space for them, right? If you want to put them out to the sides, well, there's no room. We only left a half an amma over there. Ila barai, well, the obvious would be put it outside. And we said anyway, right? This is a courtyard. This whole space is a courtyard. But, put it underneath the courtyard. What's the problem with that? You can't do that. People are going to trample on top of bodies. You don't want people trampling on bodies. It's disrespectful. Okay, so now it's true that when we just said you walked over the cave, but perhaps that was okay. But in the chutzner where I'm not sure. But anyway, that's number one issue, that you're walking on the caves. But if that isn't enough, because theoretically you're walking on the bodies, it's disrespectful to the bodies. But also we're going to have another problem, which is v'tu ha'atnan. Didn't we learn in a Mishnah Oalot, chatzer hakever ha'meh b'tochot tahol. If you're standing in this courtyard, okay, that's right, entrance into the Ma'arot, if we think that you put the bodies, right, into the courtyard, jutting out from the corners, well, and maybe you get over the part of Bizayon HaMeit, but the Mishnah says that if you walk into this courtyard, you actually are not, it's not a problem. You're not tamei. Now, why does it say you're not tamei? What's the issue? Normally, when you get within 4 cubits of a dead body, we say you're tamei no matter what. If there, there's a kever here, you're tamei because we're worried that maybe you've gone on top of a dead body. Okay, anyone who walks over a dead body becomes impure. That was the whole problem also with, if the bodies were under the courtyard, then you become tamei by walking into the courtyard. But it says in the Mishnah, you're not. Now, again, the Mishnah is trying to teach you some other halacha, which is, even though when you get within 4 am of a dead body, you're impure, that's only if it's a regular, like you're in a cemetery, because maybe you stretched your arm out and your arm went over the dead body. But if it's this kind of setup where there's a courtyard and there's a cave, there's no concern that there's a body under the courtyard, because you know that the bodies are only in the caves. And therefore, even if you're within 4 cubits of the dead body, because let's say, the dead body's right here and you're over here, which is very close, but you're not tamei because there's a clear spot where the dead body is and there's a clear spot where you stand. You're not going to accidentally put your hand into the cave and not realize. So that's why he was telling you, but either which way, it's obvious that there's no dead bodies underneath coming out from the corners of this cave, because otherwise you'd be impure by just standing in any courtyard. So I'm a Rabbi Yossi. So where did these go? So I'm a Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Hanina, da avelu kemin negeh. It's like a bolt that goes into the ground. We know that sometimes there's bolts and doors that go into the ground. Excuse me for a minute. Yeah, that means it's somewhere, we don't know where exactly. Near the entrance area of the cave, there's, let's say right here, you dig a grave down. Right here, you dig a grave down, and it's a standing grave. That's what he says. It's like a bolt goes into the ground, and then it doesn't get in the way of any of the bodies. Okay, let's just go back to our other picture. Let's see. So here, let's say right around, somewhere near the entrance, a little bit away from the other kuchs, you just dig straight down, a hole in the ground, 1 amma wide, and you did put your body. But Hama Rabbi Yochanan, but didn't Rabbi Yochanan say, turning now to Amma Bet, kfurat chamorim izo? It's like for donkeys. That's totally disrespectful. You don't bury people standing up. That really wouldn't be appropriate. Okay, Rashbam says it's like you throw them into a pit. That's like throwing someone into the ground, and it's not appropriate. Now, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Hanina doesn't think this, but Rabbi Yochanan does. So Rabbi Yochanan is going to have a different explanation. So the Rabbi Yochanan, da avelu bekeren zavit. You do it angled. Now, that's what, okay, now, angled where? So if you walk in on this side, you're actually not near the entrance, because then it would be angled out, let's say, into the courtyard. By the way, I drew it before angled, you might have noticed, because based on this, okay, it didn't have to be angled. It could have just been straight into the courtyard, according to our suggestion before. But anyway, go to the far wall, and now go to the right and go to the left and jut out into the corners, okay, on an angle. So that's what we're going to do right here. We're going to make one here and one here. Okay, this pointer thing is good because it writes things and then it disappears. So you have to look quickly, but we'll make in the 2 corners. Okay, and there you have. That's your, okay, I'll just draw this like that in the corner. What's the problem? Hanage kuchen la'adade, but think about it. There's only half a cubit at the end of this wall and half a cubit at the end of that wall. And if you put this extra kuch that's a cubit wide, you're basically jutting into the space of the other 2. You can't do that, right? We before said you had to have a space of an amma in between. This is right on top of it. So Amar Rav Ashi b'ma'ami. Rav Ashi says no. It really is jutting out. And by the way, how we get to the far wall? The Mishnah said, right? We thought it was near the petach. It said miyamina petach, chamina smos. One to the right of the entrance, one to the left. What it means is you read it as right when you're looking from the entrance, it's to the right and to the left, but in the back, right, in the far wall. Now, what they say now is that you do it on an angle. What about it overlapping? Well, you dig it deeper. Okay, remember it's 7 tefachim high, like 1 cubit and 1 handbreadth. So you do it underneath that, And then there's no overlap, and then there's space between them. Okay, so you dig deeper down, and those two extra go deeper down. Now Rav Asha is going to try to prove this, and that's where we get to the complicated diagram. So comes Rav Ashi and says, if you don't think that there's this concept of different levels underneath the ground where you could dig here and have some graves underneath, and that's fine. If you don't think we do that, and I'll prove to you that we do it otherwise. And that even without those two on the diagonal, you're going to need to do that. Why is that? Arba Ma'al wrote the Rabbi Shimon Hechi Avid Lahu. You might not have thought about this, although you might have if you saw the diagram. But if you do the diagram like a tic-tac-toe board, okay, or like a clock, there's 12, 3, 6, and 9, right? Or middle, right? Go up, down to the two sides of the middle, everything attached to the middle piece of the part of the tic-tac-toe board. Well, let's take the top left corner. So if you build a 9x9 space, okay, it's not going to be squares because remember, each of the ma'arot, right, the chatzer is 6x6, it's a square, but all the caves are 6x8. So you're going to have the 6 side coming straight off the courtyard, and the 8 side going out. So that means that your corners, your top left, top right corner, bottom left, bottom right corner are all 8x8. Okay, this is going to be important soon. They're all 8x8 squares. Now that's where there's an intersection of the kuchim that are coming out of the first ma'ara, as you see in this picture, and the second cave, right? So the cave at 9 o'clock and the cave, right, has kuchim going up. The cave at 12 o'clock has kuchim going out to the left. So the ones coming out from the left and the ones going up are going to hit each other because those are 4 cubits long and those are 4 cubits long. So they're going to intersect. So he says you can't possibly have, according to the rabbis, you have one courtyard, right? The rabbis, this is your whole courtyard. It's one courtyard with 2 caves that are each on either side. There's no intersection. But according to, and now I'm in the top left corner of our diagram, you're going to have, with 4 caves, you're going to have an overlap in every corner that's going to look like this, right? The first 2 are going to intersect each other. Okay, the first 2 from the one at 9 o'clock and the first 2 from the one at 12 o'clock are going to intersect. So therefore, what does he say? Right? These are going to totally intersect. Therefore, Rav Ashi proves it must be that 2 are lower, 2 are higher, and that's how they deal with it. And therefore, don't worry about the quarter ones. Obviously, they're also at a different level. So what he's trying to show is there's a precedent for the idea that there's different levels here. Comes Rav Huna, Bered Rav Yehoshua. Now we'll get to the picture on the top right box. So of our tic-tac-toe board. Rav Huna Bered Rav Yehoshua Amal. Why do you assume they intersect? Rabbi Shimon ki charuta. Why don't you just say that they're all like the branches of a palm tree? What are the branches of a palm tree? They come out on an angle. And now if you look at this picture, you see 8 kuchim, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 4 coming out of the ma'ara at 12 o'clock. 4 coming out of the ma'ara at 3 o'clock. And they're all angled in the same direction. And then there's 8 there. There's no overlap and all is good. Now, I did this to scale. You might see there's dots here. So each dot, like each square between 4 dots is an amma, okay? Now you can already see the issue from this without even, okay? You can see that when I drew the 8 to make them fit in, they're actually not as wide as these, okay? You can see it with your eyes, I believe. I can see it. They're not as wide. And what's the reason for that? And that's what the Gemara is going to say, this suggestion of Rav Huna Bered Rav Yehoshua, to basically, he was just trying to duck out the proof of Rav Ashi and saying, those 4 don't overlap because you could just stick them all angled out and you won't have a problem. Well, had Rav Huna Bered Rav Yehoshua berutahi. Okay, either beruta or beduta. This is when somebody says, it's ridiculous what they said. And we're going to show that mathematically, here's, I love what the Gemara gets mathematical. Some people love it, some people don't. But employing the Pythagorean theorem in the rabbi's way of saying it in very simple terms, not as complicated as, it's not like the square root of, okay, but Hadran Rav Huna Bered Rav Yehoshua beruti, it's total mistake. Okay, beruta means it's on the outs, meaning bar is out, like baraita is outside. It's throw it out. Or beduta is it's a joke. Because michti kol amta biribua amta v'tchrei chumshe balachsona. Okay, here's their mathematical equation. If you have one amma on the side of a triangle, right? You have a 90-degree triangle, and if you have one amma on each side, it's going to be 1 2/5 on the diagonal. Okay, this is the Pythagorean theorem. So kama havilu, you have chadsrei v'chumsha. Okay, if you have basically this square that we're going to now divide by a triangle, two sides of the triangle are going to be right side of the Ma'ara at 12 o'clock. Upper side, right? In other words, the right or I don't know how you call them. Okay, it'll be the right side, and then it'll be the left side, I guess, of Ma'ara, number 2, when you're coming into the courtyard. But it's basically where the two intersect. Those two sides are going to create a diagonal, according to the Gemara, their calculation, of 11 1/5. Okay, okay, based on the theory that you're going to get to 11 1/5. Now, notice this line. Why is this line important, this diagonal? Because all of the 8 kuchim are going to pass that line, because they're all going on a diagonal, going upward. They're all going to have to go through that line, which means that if each one is 1 cubit wide, let's just count. 1 cubit wide with 1 cubit in between. Now we have 8 here, so that's 8 cubits. A cubit in between is going to be 1 cubit, right, times 7, because there's 7 in between 8. So if you count all those, 8 plus 7, forget about the half on the side. Let's imagine there is no half on the side. Or even if there is, you're going to need at least 15 cubits across this diagonal. Okay? If you're going to have each kuch be 1 amma, which we already know, and an amma in between. So this line should be 15. Now this line is no way it's 15. Okay? It's 11 1/5. So it doesn't make any sense. They can't possibly come out in a diagonal and still be an amma with an amma in between each one. Doesn't work out mathematically. So we're going to throw out that suggestion. So we're done with Rav Huna B'Rav Yehoshua. We've knocked it out. We're back to, I guess Rav Ashi is right. Since they must overlap, they must necessarily overlap. It must be, we can prove from here, they must have done it in different layers, right? Different floors. And therefore, also, we're going to assume same thing with those 2 on the diagonal for Rabbi Shimon. Comes the Gemara and says, well, we have a different explanation. Okay, so therefore, I'm just going to go back and read the last line. They just repeat, Elahad Rav Huna B'Rav Yehoshua berutahi. Okay, so it must be wrong. But Ibayit Ema Kedamar Rav Shisha B'Rav Idi Benifle, Achanami Benifle. Just like Rav Shisha explained about a question about a grave that's going to come up later, explained it must be talking about infant burial, okay, which unfortunately in those days was very common. Also here we could say it was that, okay, now let's just think about it. This is very interesting. If you have a family burial plot with X number of graves, you're going to have a few plots for infants because unfortunately it was very common that infants would die. And an infant burial plot, you wouldn't need it to be 4 cubits long. So imagine, right, over here where Ma'ara, where the one at 12 o'clock and the one at 9 o'clock intersect. So the first 4, which are the ones that overlap, the first 2 on that side and 2 on that side, were very, very small. And then they don't overlap at all, right? Imagine this goes to here, this goes to here, okay? And then there's no overlap at all, and you don't have to worry about it. So that's a possible solution. Again, what's the point of all this? It just, whether or not this happened, we don't know. It just proves that Rav Ashi can't, it just rejects Rav Ashi's proof that it's obvious that they must have done different levels, and therefore these extra 2 were done at a lower level. Can't really prove that. Okay, we're just going to start the next sugya, which is really connected again to burial plots and sizes of burial plots, but we're not going to really see that yet. Tanan Hatam, it's a Mishnah in it's in Ohalot, yeah, Mishnah in Ohalot. Hamotzei meit mushkav kedarko. If you find a dead body on the road, now it's a place where you didn't know there were graves, you were digging for some reason, and you come across dead body. So what do? Notzlo ve'etfusato. You don't want the dead body to be there because then it's going to create a lot of cases of impurity and people won't even know maybe. So, you know, even if you put a sign up, it's just annoying. People have to go all the way around. So you can move the body for that reason. You take out the body and you take the tfusato. That means the dirt around it, because we assume it has some of the body, you know, parts of the body might be in there mixed in. So you take the dirt around it. Shnayim, if you find two dead bodies, notlam ve'etvu satan. You can take both bodies just like one body. You can also take two. Okay, it's like one tree and two trees, okay, versus the three. We're going to get to the three next time. What if you find three? Then what do you do? Okay, and then we'll talk about that. So we'll stop right here because that's where the daf ends. We'll do a quick review. We saw what a burial cave, the minimum size of a burial cave according to the rabbis. We saw according to Rabbi Shimon, right? So the cave itself holds 8 kuchim according to the rabbis with an open area of 4 by 6. According to Rabbi Shimon, which is all our diagrams are according to Rabbi Shimon. According to Rabbi Shimon, it's 6 by 8, and you get 13, right? 11 in this picture and 2 in the back that jut out on that far wall on an angle and below the ground, okay, or below ground more than these other graves were. Came Rav Ashi to try to prove, we know for sure you can go underground because look, otherwise they anyway intersect. Rabbi Yehoshua tried to say, well, maybe they were all on a diagonal and they didn't intersect in Rabbi Shimon's diagram, but we rejected that because mathematically it doesn't work out. And what we did say that perhaps those ones that intersected don't really overlap, but they made them for either smaller children or infants. And therefore, that was the way they avoided them overlapping. And it doesn't prove anything about whether they necessarily dug graves at different levels, one above the other. And then we just ended with this Mishnah in Ohalot that we're going to start about what you do when you find a body, and we'll deal with that more in the next class. Wishing everyone a good day, a Shana Tova, and K'tiva V'Chatima Tova.